happening here? Well, I guess I can't really do much about that, can I? Oh well, I guess we're doing this today. Alright, it's a little late. We're doing this. I cannot pronounce her name. I have a little bit of a lisp, and this name is just beyond me, so. Thessa? Thaith? Thaith? I can't pronounce it. I'm gonna call her Tessa, because I can't do it. Okay. The murder of Tessa Mary Haskins, Tucker Street, Yarmouth, 1965, July 28th. It was July 1965. 16-year-old Tessa Mary Haskins was in Yarmouth, where she planned to spend 2 weeks vacationing with relatives before returning to her grade 9 studies in Halifax in the fall. She stayed with her aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Haskins, who lived at 52 Tucker Street on the south end of town. On Wednesday night, July 28th, between 7 and 7:30 p.m., Tessa left her uncle's home to visit her cousin, Ruth Haskins, at 5 Moody Lane. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Ruth, Tessa, and another girl named Anne Forbes set out together from Ruth's house to go to a special dance featuring the band The Volcanoes at the local Yarmouth youth center. Sometime between 10:30 and 10:45 p.m., Tessa and Ruth met a young fisherman from Digby by the name of Robert Randall Camau. At approximately 11:15, the girls went upstairs to the second level of the youth center. When they came down again about 15 minutes later, Randall Camau asked Ruth to dance, but she refused. Tessa decided she wanted to go home. Her cousin Ruth tried to persuade her to stay another 20 minutes until the dance was over, so that they could leave together, but her pleas went to no avail. Tessa Haskins left the dance at 11:40 p.m., setting out alone in the mist and fog to make her way home. At 6:30 a.m. on Tuesday, July 29th, Killam Nova was driving to work along Tucker Street when he noticed a white patch and a piece of clothing strewn in the bushes along the right-hand side of the road. He backed up, then got out of the car and went around to the passenger side of the vehicle to get a better look. What he saw shook him to his core. About 20 to 30 feet from the edge of the pavement was the body of a young girl, lying face down with her head towards the road. She had been stripped almost completely naked. Her body was covered with stab wounds, her head bashed in with a rock. Noah drove to Yarmouth Town Police Station to notify them of what he'd seen. They, in turn, called in Yarmouth Municipality Dispatch of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for assistance. When police members arrived on scene, they were met with a grisly sight. The girl's battered body was lying in a clump of bushes on the north side of Tucker Street. The only clothing left on her body were nylon stockings and a scarf secured around her neck with a small gold safety pin. A blood-stained cloth covered her head. Another piece of cloth, which appeared to be from her dress, lay over her right shoulder. Several other pieces of clothing hung on trees nearby. The girl had been viciously and repeatedly stabbed. There were 6 stab wounds on the chest, 13 on her back, 2 on her head, and 5 on her arms. There was also 5 lacerations on her scalp. It appears from the cuts on her hands that the victim's assailant had attacked her with a knife and that she tried to defend herself from it. Got a burp. Police immediately set up a roadblock across Tucker Street. The intent was to keep curious spectators who might harbor the investigation or disturb crucial evidence away from the crime scene. The RCMP established roadblocks on all streets leading out of town. All right. Off-duty members of the town police were called in, and RCMP photographers spent the morning taking pictures of the body and the surrounding area. Police officers scoured the scene for clues. Between the north side of the street and the body, they found a purse, a piece of clothing, and one red woman's shoe. The other shoe and a blue polka dot handkerchief were found on a footpath leading away from the south side of Tucker Street. Police opened the purse and found a red wallet identifying the victim as Tessa Mary Haskins. Although they didn't know it then, Arthur and Louise Haskins lived just a stone's throw away. The young Halifax girl had been attacked and killed just 200 feet from the home of her aunt and uncle. News of the murder traveled fast. Within hours, the killing was the #1 topic of conversation on the street, in stores, and business places. An extra edition of the Yarmouth Herald was published of the same day the body was found, and the writers of the front page account of the murder said people used the telephone so much to try to get the news of the incident or talk it out with neighbors that the telephone lines were clogged, and making calls was often done with extreme difficulty. Tessa Haskins was taken by ambulance to the Yarmouth Hospital at about 8:45 a.m. By that time, police had made the connections between the Haskins house at 52 Tucker Street and the victim, but they were advised by the doctor who attended Mr. and Mrs. Haskins that morning not to take the couple to the hospital to identify the body. Instead, the murdered victim was identified by Ruth Haskins and as her cousin, Tessa. Health Unit Director Dr. V.K. Rideout examined the body. Then, under his direction, Dr. Colin Wood performed an autopsy. According to the Yarmouth Herald, the autopsy indicated that death was due to the skull and brain injury. Cuts were found on the body, but would not have been fatal in themselves, it was reported. It would later be determined that Haskins had suffered a fractured skull. The fracture extended from about the right elbow, eyebrow, to the back of the head on the left side. The central part of the fracture was depressed from the area above the right ear to the back of the side of the head. The cause of death was bleeding into the chest cavity and into the depressed cavity of the brain caused by the fracture of the skull. Although early reports in the Yarmouth Herald had described the slaying as an apparent sex murder, the medical examiner showed the girl had not been sexually molested. Back at the crime scene, investigators discovered 2 blade knives with portions of its blades snapped off and a large blood-stained rock near the bushes where the girl's body had lain. The rock weighed approximately 40 to 45 pounds. At 2:45 on Thursday afternoon, members of the Halifax and Truro detachment of the RCMP arrived with the police and tracking dogs. Under the direction of its Truro dogmaster, the animal attempted to pick up and follow a scent off the girl's assailant, but rain showers had washed the scent away, and the tracking attempt was abandoned after an hour and a half. The pair then turned their attention to finding physical evidence related to the crime. The dog worked the final adjustments to The dog worked the field adjacent to the spot where the body was found, but a report in the Halifax Chronicle Herald the following morning said there was no indication of what was found. Hello, we're reading scary stories. By the following morning, the day Haskins was buried in Halifax, police had questioned a large number of people connected with the case and were broadcasting a description of the suspect. A man, believed to be from Halifax, had been seen in the area where the girl's body was found. He was described as husky, medium-built height, about 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighing roughly 175 to 80 pounds. Police set up roadblocks on routes leading into Halifax. According to the Halifax paper, checks on people entering the city were carried out throughout the night, but nothing significant was revealed. On Tuesday, Inspector C.J. Dowie, Officer, sorry, I get some heartburn. CJW officer in command of the Halifax RCMP division took charge of the case. By Tuesday, August 5th, all police detachments in Nova Scotia, as well as police forensics in adjacent provinces and the United States, had been alerted, and the RCMP Crime Detection Lab in Sackville, New Brunswick, was busy examining a number of exhibits related to the murder. Meanwhile, investigation in the Yarmouth area remained intensive. RCMP officers conducted interviews in the Parade Street barracks, visited numerous people in their homes, and questioned teenagers who had attended the dance on the night of the murder in an effort to unearth new evidence. Their efforts paid off. Bit by bit, police began to piece together what had happened on Tucker Street the previous Wednesday evening. Michael, Nickerson, and John Noah, both 17, had attended the dance on the night of the murders. Nickerson told police that he and Noah left the youth center at 11:53 p.m. As they turned onto Tucker Street on their way home, they saw a female and a male up ahead. Like Nickerson and Noah, they were out on the north side of Tucker Street, headed east. Shortly after the boys caught sight of the pair, the female and male crossed towards the south side of the street. The female remained in the middle of the street, and the male was behind her. Neither the ditch on the south side. At that point, they were near a footpath that runs south from Tucker Street into a field adjacent to the road. Nickerson said it sounded like they were laughing. Nickerson and Noah didn't pay much attention to what was going on for a few minutes, but Noah said the couple later crossed Tucker Street again. This time the girl was running, with the male not far behind. They had heard screams, then more screams, and then finally moans. When Nickerson and Noah came alongside the grassy area where the noise had appeared to be coming from, they saw a man straddling a girl who was laying prone on the ground, her head towards the north. The man, just 15 to 30 feet from the boys, had his back to the road, and his arm was moving in an up and down motion. Noah said he could also hear a hollow thumping sound, like if you took your hand and hit your chest quite hard. As the boys passed, the female's attacker appeared to turn his head, but on such a foggy, moonless night, they couldn't see his face. They also offered differing descriptions of the man. Noah said the man was quite husky, with broad shoulders and wearing a light khaki or fawn jacket and a dark pair of pants. Nickerson said he was wearing what appeared to be a dark sports jacket and dark pants. Instead of running for help, the boys hid in the Haskins's yard just east of the field where the struggle was taking place and listened. Fucking idiots. The moaning continued for a few minutes, then they heard someone approach them along Tucker Street from the direction of the field. They thought it was the girl's assailant. He was quite young and had on a gray sports coat. I'm not sure if it was gray, but with little light in color. He had on soft-soled shoes and dark pants, Noah said. After the young man passed by, the boys headed back towards the spot where they'd last seen the couple. But as they drew closer, they heard a loud rip like ripping of clothing, and we headed back to the spot. I skipped a sentence. After the young man passed by, the boys headed back towards the spot where they'd last seen the couple. But as they drew closer, they heard a loud ripping like a ripping of clothing, and were headed back to the spot where they were in before. Just a second. Need a little bit more light. They waited another 5 minutes. There were more groans from the field. Then they heard the loud click of a pair of hand-soled shoes on the pavement. Another man passed their hiding spot, again from the west to east along Tooker Street. According to Noah, he was tall, dressed in a dark suit and white shirt and tie. His cheeks were quite hollowed out, and he was quite bald. He had some hair. Nickerson and Noah remained hidden for another 5 to 10 minutes until roughly 12:20 a.m. About 2 minutes before they left, they heard a final shrill shriek. Although they were less than a block away from Noah's home, they decided to run 400 yards to the Catholic rectory to get Father Armstrong, the Noah family pastor. They rang the bell 3 or 4 times, but no one came to the door. John, Noah, and Michael Nickerson headed back to Noah's house on Green Street. Nickerson said they told Noah's mother what they had heard and seen, but she didn't think much of it at the time. 10 minutes later, Nickerson headed back to his own home on Pleasant Street. It was Noah's father who discovered that Tessa Mary Haskins' lifeless body the following morning. Noah and Nickerson were not the only people who witnessed the crime. In fact, there were at least 2 other witnesses. The young man who had walked past the boys' hiding place west of the Haskins house was Garnet Robichaud, 19. He told police that he had been at the dance earlier that evening, and he headed up Tooker Street. He heard the rustling in the grass off to the north side of the road. When he looked into that direction, he saw a man lying on top of a girl. Both were now lying parallel to the street. The man closer to the pavement, and the girl behind him. Neither the man nor the girl moved nor made any sound. I said, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?" Robichaud received no reply and continued on his way home. He said he'd been unable to see anything of the girl except for the top of her hair. He couldn't identify the man either, as his back was to the street, but Robichaud said he was wearing what appeared to be a light-colored windbreaker. Raymond Big Bagnet, 18, lived at 43 Tooker Street, down the street from Haskinson's aunt and uncle's house, and across the street from the scene of the crime. Bagnet said he went to bed at 10:45 p.m. on the night of the murder, and he was wakened by screams. He watched the events unfold from the time of the couple crossing Tooker Street from the north to south. He said they went onto the footpath, and almost immediately they came back to the road, and she separated from him. Vigant thought he had heard her say, "Don't, Grant," but admitted he could have been wrong about the name. Vigant said the man continued to hold on to her as they moved back onto the road, and the girl screamed another 4 or 5 times. They proceeded back towards the north side of Tooker Street and broke contact. There she said, "All right, I will go in there with you." And she went in and he followed. She went out of sight, and then all of a sudden she jumped up, and I guess he grabbed her and she fell down in the ditch by the pavement. Vagan said it was too dark to make out the features of the people, but the man appeared to be wearing a tight-fitted clothes of a darker color, including a windbreaker sort of thing. He appeared to be on the average height and husky build. A few minutes later, Vigant heard the click of heels on the pavement and saw a man stop for a few seconds to look into the fields where the girl and the man were lying. The man continued on his way. Incredibly, none of the 4 witnesses, or does the hollow-cheeked man make it 5, thought to call the police or even bang on the door of Mr. and Mrs. Haskins, whose niece was being murdered in the field next door. That's about right. In the investigation into the slaying of Tessa Mary Haskins, it was described by Halifax police spokesman as one of the most intensive in the history of the province. A team of 9 investigators, including Inspector Dowie, Senior investigator from all over Nova Scotia and the dog master and several dogs from Truro were on the scene continuously checking out various aspects of the case. Over 180 people were questioned. The Chronicle Herald reported that the police were putting forth every effort with very little sleep in the attempt to apprehend the slayer. On August 9th, just 11 days after the body of Tessa was found, the police believed they had their man. In the initial phase of the investigation, the police had developed a list of all 310 people who had attended on July 28th dance at the youth center. As these and other people gave evidence, the name of Robert Everett came up on 4 separate occasions. It soon became apparent that 3 men from the Digby fishing vessel Zephyr, Zephyr, I tried to read too fast and I cannot read at all. Lost myself. Included Robert Everett, had been among those who attended the dance. The description of the suspect, 5 foot 8 inch tall, approximately 180 pounds, stocky built with curly hair, seemed to fit Everett. The longliner had left Yarmouth on the evening of July 29th, the day the body was discovered, and wasn't due back in port until August 9th. Shortly after 9 p.m. on Monday evening, August 9th, police were at the Brandy Foods Limited Wharf on Water Street as the Zephyr came into port. After the boat tied up, Constable Garsnick and Constable Potts of the RCB jumped aboard to conduct a search of the vessel. Meanwhile, RCB Corporal Gerald Howard found and spoke with the man police had been looking for. Robert Everett was really Robert Randall Comeau. Although the 20-year-old fisherman's first name was Robert, he went by the name of Randy. Everett was the surname of the grandfather who had raised him. On the boat, a search of the crew quarters turned up several items of clothing which seemed to indicate at least one of the crew members had been involved in some type of killing, be it animal or human. When Constable Legastic lifted the mattress of Randy Comeau's bunk, he found khaki sports shirt and a pair of men's trousers. Both were stained with blood. He and Constable Potts also found a black pair of men's shoes, a work jacket, and a brown leather suitcase containing various items of clothing. All were seized. Wayne Allen and Jim Langthorne's crew members, who had also been at the dance, were questioned and released. Randy Comeau was taken to the police detachment for questioning. According to the testimony that would later given by police at the trial, Comeau first denied having anything to do with the murder, telling Corporal Howard that when the dance ended, he walked from the youth center along Main Street to the Bright Spot. He'd been drinking earlier in the evening. He said he had thrown up on the blue sweater he was wearing, so he tossed it in the garbage receptacle near the Bright Spot before heading back to the Zephyr. All right, be right back. Sorry. You are not starting with that. What? You're happy, kitty. Okay. After questioning Comeau at the police station for about half an hour, Corporal Howard left Comeau with Police Chief Eugene Nickerson and headed back to the boat. Chief Nickerson noticed that the young man appeared tense and upset. His hands were clenched, his knuckles white. Chief Nickerson said to Comeau, If there's anything bothering you, why don't you tell me about it? He got no reply and asked the same question again, just as Staff Sergeant D.J. Wright was coming into the room. Camo answered, "Well, I didn't try to rape her." Fucking asshole. Camo would later contest that Staff Sergeant Wright came up to him and shook him bodily at the point, scaring him so much that he wanted to jump out the window. Both Wright and Nickerson denied that there was any type of physical contact between Camo and the police officer. They had also denied that Coe was subjected to any threats, promise, or coercion under order to write a confession from him. Camo was given the police warning and asked for a statement. RCB said he voluntarily dictated the statement to Staff Sergeant Wright over a 45-minute period. The statement read in part. Well, I started off good tonight. On Wednesday, the 28th of July, 1965, I went to the dance at the Yarmouth Youth Center with Wayne Allen. I met a girl at the dance. I didn't know her name. She told me she lived in Halifax. I left the dance about midnight. I saw a girl walking on Main Street. She turned up a side street by the park, and I followed her for quite a distance. I was thinking awful things when I was walking behind her, things that I had been thinking of for a long time. I had been thinking about killing someone, just anyone. I followed this girl quite a distance. She was walking on the side of the street, and I walked up behind her and grabbed her from behind. I had a blue polka dot handkerchief, which I covered her mouth with, but she started screaming. But she still screamed. I had an open jackknife in my pocket. When she screamed, I knifed her in the back. I was just wild, and I didn't want to rape her. I just wanted to kill her. I remember stabbing her several times, but I don't remember hitting her with anything else. I figured she was dead, so I went into the field down the street. I remember running into the field, and the next thing I remember, I was waking up in the field. It was still dark. I hid my sweater, which had a lot of blood on it, down by Sweeney's Wharf. I walked back to my boat, the Zephyr, and I had a lot of blood on some of my other clothes. I put the bloody clothes under my mattress on the boat. Sergeant Wright read the statement back to Camo, including the paragraph authored by Wright, saying no threat or promises had been used by the police to get a confession. Robert Camo signed the statement and was immediately arrested for the murder of Tressa Haskins. When Corporal Howard returned to the police station, he, Staff Sergeant Wright, and Corporal J. Kovex, Kovex, took Randy Camo to the Yarmouth waterfront by car to search a water-filled boiler tank. Okay. Took Randy to the Yarmouth waterfront by car to search a water-filled boiler tank from Camo's discarded sweater. The sweater was not in the tank. Next, the officers drove to the youth center and asked Camo to take them on a tour, recreating his movements on the night of the dance. Camo directed them to drive down Queen Street to Main Street, then east to Tucker Street. About 50 yards west of Hankinson's house, he told them to stop the car, and they all got out. According to the police, Camo said, "This is where I first grabbed her and stabbed her." He said he had stabbed her twice. Then officers asked him if he could remember anything that took place on the opposite side of the street. He walked to the other side of the road and said, "I don't know. I can't remember anything after that. I think I went completely out of my mind." By the car, the accused directed the police through the route he had followed back to the ship. East on Tucker Street to Green, north on Green to southeast, west on southeast to where he crossed the street and entered the ballpark through a hole in the fence. south to William, and north on William to Albert, west on Albert to Prince, south at Prince to Gowdy, and north on Gowdy to East Street. Then he'd laid down in a vacant lot by a fence. Police noted that night that the area of grass next to the fence indicated by Camo appeared to be compressed. Not long afterwards, he crossed Main Street and followed Commercial Street down to Lower Water Street, where he hid his sweater. He returned to the ship. Randall Camo spent the night of August 9th in Yarmouth County Jail. I ate before I read, and now it's hard to breathe. The following morning, August 10th, Camo was charged with capital murder before the provincial magistrate C. Roger Randall. He was not represented by a lawyer. The Yarmouth courtroom was crowded to the doors, reported the Yarmouth Chronicle Herald. With an overflowing crowd out in the corridor when the court opened, at the request of the Crown Prosecutor Donald Chipman, the accused was remained in jail for 1 week for a psychiatric examination. Camo was to appear in court at 11 a.m. on August 16th to determine if he was mentally competent to stand trial. He also appeared in the police lineup that afternoon. Michael Nickerson, John Noah, and Grant Rubishow were asked if they could recognize the Haskinson's girl assailant in the group of 5 or 6 men, but none was able to identify the killer. On August 16th, Magistrate A.B. Dickey found that Camo was fit to stand trial. The preliminary hearing was held on October 4th. Before Magistrate Randall found that there was enough evidence to hold the accused over for trial on the charges of capital murder. Randall Camo only had one known police record. He had been convicted of drinking and driving the previous summer. Camo's trial was held during the Yarmouth sitting of Supreme Court, Nova Scotia, the following spring. The trial began on April 12, 1966. His Lordship, Honorable Mr. Justice Biscuit, presiding. James Reedon and Dave Thomason were the Crown prosecutors. P.R. Wolvin was the solicitor for the defense. A jury of 12 men, no women, had been selected to hear the case. RCP Corporal Clifford Folty was the first witness called by the prosecution. It was Folty who had photographed the murder scene and drawn a sketch of the area, indicating where the items related to the crime were found. Corporal Folty described the exhibition obtained by police, including pieces of cloth, the murder weapons, and a small stone that had been removed from the back of the girl's throat during the autopsy. I don't know what that was. Talk of the town was that Haskins had been made to swallow rocks during the Tucker Street assault. Along with the men's shirt, pants, jacket, and shoes, police had found a pair of men's shorts with blood on them and a blue polka dot handkerchief aboard the Zephyr. These were entered into evidence. Dr. Vernon Rideout testified next. He said the temperature of the body when it was found indicated that Tessa Haskins had died sometime between 11 p.m. on July 28th and 3 a.m. on July 29th. Dr. Woods testified that the stab wounds on the girl's body were consistent with the type of knife found at the scene, and the injuries of her head constituted with having been caused by a large rock found nearby. It was his opinion that the perpetrator had hit the girl's head with the rock 5 different times. The knife was bloodied, and the rock contained both hair and blood samples. Killam Noah, the man who discovered the girl's body, told the court that he saw it as he was driving down Tucker Street on his way to work. Defense counsel Mr. Wolava asked him if he had been looking for any evidence of violence in the area. Mr. Noah admitted that he had been paying particular attention to the bushes west of the Haskinsons' house as he drove by, but said he hadn't been looking for anything specific, even though it was his son who had witnessed the attacks very early that morning and told his mother about it. Ruth Haskins was next. She confirmed that she and Tessa had met Randy Camo at the dance and that he had been wearing a light blue shirt or sweater that night. She said he was courteous and there was nothing smart or rude about his manner. At 11:30 that night, Tessa had said she wanted to go home. Ruth persuaded her to stay for another 10 minutes, but she refused to stay at the dance until it was over, despite the fact that there were only 20 minutes left. When Tessa left the dance, Ruth went with her as far as the inner door of the youth center and gave her directions to get back to her uncle's house. That was the last time Ruth saw her cousin alive. Michael Nickerson told the court that while he and John Noah had witnessed the crime, they had been unable to see Haskins' attacker clearly because of the weather conditions, the location, and the fact that it was moonless night. It was not too clear, kind of like a mist. You couldn't see in the Adlers. It was too shaded. There was not much light on that street at the time. There was also a lot of grass on the edge of the road. Where you looked in the alders, it was pitch black except for a few inlets like in the alders. Nickerson said he didn't know why he hadn't run to get help when they realized what was happening. Raymond Vangant was also asked why he hadn't done something when he witnessed the struggle between Haskins and Grant on Tucker Street. I don't know, he said. I didn't suspect anything. Dude, what was there to suspect? Robert J. LeBlanc supplied details about Camo, which had disappeared from the watery-filled tank. I think they're supposed to say sweater in there somewhere, but they left that word out. Robert LeBlanc supplied details about Camo's sweater, which had disappeared from the water-filled tank on Water Street sometime between the early morning of July 29th and August 9th, the day the police apprehended Camo. Blanc said he had attended the dance. A few days later, he found the sweater inside the boiler tank. It was all wet with brown water. He took the sweater to his grandma's house. The next day, he took the clean sweater from his grandmother's clothesline and began wearing it. No! Oh no! He's wearing the murder sweater after he got his granny to clean it. Oh, no. Shortly after he left Yarmouth and went to Quebec to look for work, he was wearing the sweater the day police tracked him down. Oh, no. He got his granny to wash the murder sweater and he wore it to go get a job and the police confiscated it back. Oh, I'm so sorry, Treza. LeBlanc said the sweater that they showed in court was not the same one he found, saying he had deeper pockets and more than just one hole in the back. Then captain of the boat also said the sweater showed in court was not Camo's. It had black or dark blue bands on it. Camo had a yellow or gold band. Exactly whose second sweater belonged to or where Camo's went to is not clear. Okay, so there's a slight chance that he's not wearing the murder sweater. I'm so sorry, Granny. Probably gave her a heart attack. Wayne Allen, Randy Cameau's crewmate from the Zephyr, was a critical witness. He said that he and Cameau had left the ship between 8 and 8:30 p.m. on the night of the dance. They'd gone to Allen's Argyle Street home for a while and drank some beer, then left for the dance between 9:30 and 10 p.m. He said Cameau was wearing a blue sweater. Got a burp. Allen said he left the dance hall alone between 11:45 and 12 p.m. He walked with Wanda Burwell to Caesar's taxi, then went on alone to Caesar's store. There, he met up with Jim Langthorne, another crewmate. The two then walked south on Main Street to Joe Pink's Tavern, where they met Carol Allen and Ann Bain. Ann Bain and Carol Allen said they had met at Bright Spot further north. I don't know what this Bright Spot is. They went to the Bright Spot. Is that the name of where the dance was? Allens decided to accompany the girls on their walk home. In Middleton, they met Lauren LeBlanc, who had agreed to come along. They walked up Vancouver Street and then towards Overton until they reached Overton Corner. Friends of Wayne came by in an Oldsmobile or Buick and gave the girls a lift the rest of the way, then drove Wayne Allen home. He said he arrived home between 2 and 2:30 a.m. on July 29th. Wayne Allen arrived back on the boat after 10 p.m. After 10 a.m. on the morning Haskins' body was found. Almost immediately, he asked Randy Cameau, "What did you do? Why did you do it?" But received no answer. It is not clear why Allen suspected Cameau of the crime. In court, he was asked what he meant by his question, that only said, "I thought he heard about the murder." Allen said although all the crew members were talking about the murder on the way out to George's Bank that night, Randy Cameau said nothing about it at all. Not all of Wayne Allen's testimony was damning to Cameau. In court, Allen said that the sweater in the evidence did not belong to Cameau, and added that he had never seen the shirt like the blood-stained one seized by police aboard the Zephyr. Not that color. He said he didn't even remember Cameau having one that color. Later, however, Allen said he believed he himself had a shirt that color. Good Lord. First, if you're just popping in, the missing sweater was found by a guy, so he took it, blood-stained sweater was found by him, so he took it to his grandma, so his grandma cleaned it, so he had to have a shirt to wear. And then the police had to confiscate the shirt in Quebec off of the guy because he was wearing it when the police found him. Yeah. Normal shit. Okay. The testimony of Cameau's uncle, Arthur Everett, and Zephyr Captain William Gidney hurt Cameau's case. Everett said his nephew had told him he remembered stabbing her twice and had previously admitted that he had urged kill on the weekend of July 24th. At the preliminary hearing, the accused told his uncle that he didn't remember saying that he stabbed the girl twice. He denied having anything to do with it. Captain Gidney said he had visited Cameau in jail the day following his arrest and asked Cameau if he had killed the girl. According to Gidney, Cameau said, I didn't. I stabbed her twice." Dude. I didn't kill her, I just stabbed her twice. Fucking idiot. Gidney had conversation with Ernest Michaels, the jailer, prior to the conversation. Under oath, Michael said he couldn't remember if he had threatened Camo prior to his statement. Police forensic evidence included at the time of trial showed that blood and hair samples found on the men's clothes aboard the Zephyr was consistent with that of the victims. Grass and seeds found on the clothing was also consistent with the grass and seeds type found at the scene of the crime. However, it is not certain whether these clothes actually belonged to Camo. Although they were found under the mattress of his bunk, no one actually identified them as belonging to Camo. The only thing that Captain Giddy identified as Camo's were a pair of black shoes, and they had no blood, seeds, or grass on them, only hair. A summary of the prosecutor's closing statements given by Mr. Thompson follows. Corporal Monaco, who was the hair and fiber man from Ottawa, indicated that there was a good possibility that the hair found on the victim's clothing was the same as the pubic hair of the accused. Hair on the two red shoes and hair found at the scene of the crime is the same hair as the accused. This is very significant. He also stated that hair found on the victim's back was from the accused, and that hair on the knife and the rock seemed to have come from the same source. Corporal Painter from Regina, he gave evidence on the breaking down of the blood sample, indicated that the victim had blood type O, factor M, but the accused had M and N factors. Although Corporal Painter examined materials from the pants taken from under the accused mattress, he found it contained type O blood and had only M factors in it. This caused him to conclude that the accused had the victim's blood on his pants. Mr. Garner from Ottawa said he examined several specimens of seeds picked up at the scene of the crime and sent to him. He also examined seeds that Mr. McElwain had and Sergeant Holliday picked up from the accused's clothing. He concluded that there were 13 types of seeds found on the accused's clothing and 19 types at the scene of the crime. He said 9 types were common to both groups. In other words, the accused's clothing had 9 types of seeds on them, which were the same as seeds at the scene of the crime. The evidence of Captain Giddy and Wayne Allen is very significant, in that on the morning of July 29th, when they set out on the boat, everyone was talking about the murder. The accused was present for 18 hours, but took no part in the conversation. Another strong piece of evidence is that the accused's whereabouts are unknown from the time he left the dance until he awoke on the Zephyr. A shirt and a pair of pants were found under his mattress on the Zephyr. Blood is under the right arm of the shirt and on the crotch area of the trousers. Circumstantial evidence. The dress of the victim was white but turned pink because of her blood, and it was almost certain that the blood on the accused's clothes came from the blood on the victim's clothes. Her brassiere, girdle, and slip had large quantities of blood on them, and blood was found on the accused's clothing. Captain Giddy said the accused stated he had stabbed the girl twice. Camo also told this to his uncle and said the same in his testimony statement to police. The statement was given freely and voluntarily. Mr. Thomas said this was planned and deliberate murder. The accused had been thinking about killing someone for about a week prior to the offense. There was evidence of fractures in the victim's skull, and her body was found almost completely nude, with only something on the shoulders and the legs. There was no evidence of rape. But what about the pubic hair? There is no evidence there was anything wrong with the accused's ability to think, and nothing suggesting his power of reasoning were gone. Mr. Thomas asked for a verdict of capital murder on basis that the murder was planned and deliberate. He said everyone was liable for the natural consequences of his actions. Sorry, I hate this. A summary of the defense closing statement given by Mr. Woodlever. Woolliver. Finally. Mr. Woolliver stated that the Crown had brought in evidence which was harmful and rejected. It had also failed to bring in everything that might suggest the accused is innocent. On board the Zephyr was the captain, the accused, and Wayne Allen. Every time the crew was mentioned, the court heard about Langthorne and Clarence Greek, but they weren't brought to the court, and they are only mentioned as having been on board the ship. There is doubt as to whose clothing was entered into evidence. Only one item was positively identified to the accused, and that was the shoes, as identified by Captain Giddy. No one had said whether or not the shirt and sweater belonged to Camo. 5 men living together at sea for 10 days should know each other's clothing. True. Underclothing was in a suitcase and removed by Corporal Potts and Corporal Howard in his office. Corporal Howard got it from Corporal Potts and Corporal Lagasic. There was no evidence of where it came from. The Crown should have brought forth all evidence. Although who owns the suitcase? Failure to bring in all the crew members put the court in the position of not knowing the whole story. Wayne Allen stated that he was with Wanda Burwell after the dance for 15 or 20 minutes, but she wasn't brought in as a witness. The Nickerson boy and Noah boy were walking up Tooker Street at 12:05. The girl was dead within 20 minutes. Where was Wayne Allen? As for the blue cardigan sweater, there is no doubt the accused sweater was found in the tank by a young Leblanc. The accused took police to the tank. The Crown abandoned its position that the sweater was evidence with the same one that belonged to Camo. Corporal Howard stated the girl was stabbed by the side of the road. The distance are only guesses. No measurements were made, but they're reasonable. Corporal Howard said that there was a pool of blood there, 18 inches wide, and another with no dirt in it. An eyewitness said the attacker had his knees on the victim and that his arms went up and down. How could this be done without getting blood on his shoes? The doctor said she probably bled as much outside as in. She was dragged into the bushes, and the man who did this must have gotten blood on his shoes. The only thing brought up in the relation to the shoes was the hair. When Zephyr came in, police wanted Randall Camo. Corporal Howard talked to Camo for 3/4 of an hour in his office, and Camo told them he had left the dance, walked down Main Street into the area of Bright Spot, thrown up on his sweater, and gotten rid of it in the garbage bin somewhere near Bright Spot. Then he went on board the boat and went to bed. Yet the Crown stated that there was no evidence in relation to where the accused went that night. Almost done. Sorry about that. There was no evidence that the accused had even been on Tooker Street in his life. Corporal Howard was the first policeman that the accused talked to. Camo spoke briefly to Wright, and almost immediately Wright went into his office, wrote the confession, and Camo signed it. The accused was arrested. 4 people witnessed the crime. The Noah boy, the attacker. 4 people witnessed the crime. The Noah boy said the attacker wore a light fawn or khaki jacket. No reasonable man could look at Camo's sweater or anything resembling it and say it's light khaki or fawn. Eric Rubishow said the attacker was wearing a windbreaker type of jacket and mentioned a zipper. Raymond Vigant said the attacker's clothes were tight-fitting, and he mentioned a windbreaker. This evidence could raise reasonable doubt as to whether it was the accused who was there. The description of the man himself doesn't fit that of the accused. The four witnesses weren't asked if Camo was the man who attacked Haskins. Michelle Nickerson, the Noah boy, and Grant Rubishow were taken to the police station, where Camo was put into a lineup. Camo was among the 6 or 8 men in the lineup. He couldn't be identified. Witnesses' description of Haskins's clothing was quite accurate. It could be that an unknown or unseen assailant attacked her. A hollow-cheeked man walked by and was seen by Nickerson and Noah. Grant Rubishow described his clothing and said no one followed him and there was no one behind him. The Crown theory was that the accused attacked Haskins, walked through the bushes, and crossed the field. The chief described grass 4 to 12 inches high, with a large quantity of blood. The next day, the police were unable to find the trail. Wolfland mentioned that Corporal Howard didn't go through the field. If anyone walked through it, a path would almost be visible, even if it had been raining. Captain Gidney established that the accused was in his bunk in the early morning hours of July 29th. He talked to Camo while Camo had coffee. Wayne Allen came to the boat, and his first words to the accused were, "Why did you do it?" There was no indication that the accused knew anything about what Allen meant. It certainly was on Wayne Allen's mind. Wayne lived on Argyle Street, in the area where the murder occurred. The little Allen girl says they met. The little Allen girl says they met Wayne at Joe Pink's, while Allen says it was at Bright Spot. Wayne's position after the dance is mysterious. It is questionable how a statement was obtained from Camo by police and almost bizarre how the Crown says it occurred. The Crown found their evidence with relation to the accused weak and knit it together with his statement. Who did the blood-stained underwear in the suitcase belong to? No fingerprints were taken. The Crown failed to tell who owned the suitcase, giving rise to doubt with relation to the clothes he was wearing. There was no blood on his shoes. Wayne Allen could have killed Tessa Haskins. An unknown assailant may also have been there. A summary of Judge's closing remarks to the jury follows. Mr. Justice Bisset, Bisset, told the jury that he appreciated the very careful attention to give throughout the trial. They, in making their decision, must be governed solely by the evidence, but the exhibits and by the law. They must conclude all the facts and eliminate from their minds anything they may have heard outside of the courtroom. There can't be any reasonable doubt in their minds if they pass a guilty verdict. If they have any reasonable doubt, that doubt must be placed in favor of the accused. In order to return a verdict of guilty or not, the jury must be and not unanimous. There were 3 verdicts open to the jury: guilty of capital murder, guilty of non-capital murder, not guilty of anything. Mr. Justice Biscott told the jury it had evidence that Tessa was dead. What? That the jury that had evidence that Tessa was dead. No shit, that's why they're there. The evidence from Dr. Wood, the pathologist, and the wounds couldn't have been self-inflicted, and that evidence of the boys who were on the road that night who saw a man with his knees on the girl's abdomen and his hand moving up and down. It may have been dark night, and the boys may not have been able to describe exactly how this person was clothed, but it may well be that they could tell whether it was a man or a woman on top of the girl. There's evidence from both Camo's uncle, Mr. Everett, and Captain Giddy that Comeau said he stabbed her twice. The experts have also given evidence. Corporal Monaco said it was a good possibility that the hair on a piece of clothing found on the evidence left leg was one of the accused's pubic hair. Secondly, that there was a good possibility that the hair found on the knife, found at the scene of the crime, and on the large rock is from the victim's head. Third, there's a good chance that the hair found on two ladies' red shoes and hairs found at the scene were the accused hairs. Lastly, the hair found on the accused shoe may have been hair from the victim. This was before DNA testing. Lastly, the hair found on the accused shoe may have been from the victim. Corporal Painter said the victim had Group A0 blood, which contained M factor. The accused blood was also Group 0, but contained M and N factors. The accused trousers had Group O blood with M factors only, which would make it that of the victims. Peter Granger, seed analyst from the experimental farm in Ottawa, said 19 different seeds of grass and roots gathered at the scene of the crime. 13 different kinds were found on the accused's clothing, and 9 different kinds of seeds were common to both. The accused had 9 seed varieties on his clothes, which were the same as that found in the area where the crime was committed. The judge said the jury must be careful when dealing with circumstantial and direct evidence. Capital murder is when murder is planned and deliberate. All other murder is non-capital murder. For capital murder, there must first be an intent to kill or do bodily harm that he knows was likely to cause death, and was reckless when death ensued or not. Also, intent must be the result of formulated plans and deliberation. The judge said that it seemed to him that there was a very grave doubt whether what the accused did that day was planned and deliberate, but that was for the jury to decide. He told them to remember that both planning and deliberations are essential elements in the crime of capital murder. These two go together. In the statement, which Comeau gave to police, he said that he had been thinking of killing just anyone, and that he didn't remember doing it. The Crown must prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this man killed this girl, and to find him guilty as charged that he deliberated and planned it. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Robert Randall Comeau guilty of capital murder. The sentence of the court was that on the 20th day, July 1966, between the hours of 12 midnight and 3 a.m., Comeau would be taken to the jail yard in the county of Yarmouth and hanged by the neck until dead. The last words the accused spoke in the trial were, "It was not a fair trial, my lord." The case was appealed. On appeal, Comeau was sentenced to 25 years in jail. Okay, basic maths. 66, 76, 86, 86. He got out in 1990. I don't know if he's alive or not. He would be alive. I don't know if he's even near it. Anyway, my apologies for that, but that's another one down. Whew, I need practice.